This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, July 15th. Welcome to Africa 54. We continue to work remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But what hasn't changed is our commitment to bringing you the latest and most important news from the African continent and around the world. This is today's Africa 54. At least 72 people have died amid the widespread violence, looting and vandalism across South Africa. But a 2-year-old girl was saved from a burning building in Durban Tuesday after her mother threw her to safety as they escaped a burning high-rise building. The 26-year-old mother told Reuters on Wednesday that she had been on the 16th floor when the fire broke out. That's when she ran down the stairs with her daughter and made her way to a ledge above the street and tossed the toddler to a group of people below as bystanders cried out in astonishment. We begin our coverage of the unrest in South Africa with those dramatic pictures in this report from Reuters.
This is the moment a baby was thrown from a burning building in South Africa's Durban. The child can be seen being dropped to safety from between slats in the side of the City Life building, to a woman who then throws the baby down to people in the street. The reason for the fire is not known, but Durban has been a focal point for days of unrest in South Africa. Violence erupted last week in KwaZulu-Natal province, where Durban is located, after the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma. But it has rapidly escalated into widespread looting and destruction, fueled by other grievances. More than 70 people have died and hundreds of buildings have been wrecked. During the dramatic escape from the City Life building on Tuesday, people also used ladders and makeshift slides to escape from the building's exterior.
That report was filed by Reuters. Innocent lives are being lost in the wave of violence gripping South Africa. A 15-year-old boy was killed by a stray bullet in a Johannesburg township on Wednesday, according to a Reuters photographer at the scene who saw the body and his distraught relatives grieving. A crowd gathered around the body of teenager Vusi Dlamini in Vosloorus to the south of Johannesburg. Among his relatives at the scene were his grandmother and his sister. Acting Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, appealed to South Africans for calm, asking them to resist the urge to stock up on supplies to avoid spreading COVID-19.
We urge members of the public to remain calm and exercise restraint during these trying times. Government is working with the National Consumer Goods Council to ensure food security. If we have members of the public flocking into the shops and malls to buy foodstuff, we are also risking the spread of COVID-19, and it will go to uncontrollable levels with the Delta variant that is currently prevalent in our country. Another area of concern that has been brought into the attention of government is members of the community taking up arms to try and protect their properties. We understand the concern for community for their safety and their need to protect their properties. We would like to urge these communities to work with the law enforcement agencies to stop the looting and violence and to operate within the rule of law.
Some residents in Durban are defending their neighborhoods with guns and baseball bats. David Doyle has more.
In a Durban neighborhood, residents are taking matters into their own hands. Amid widespread violence in South Africa, some have armed themselves with baseball bats and guns to block access to their streets and to chase looters out of local supermarkets. Protests following the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma have been centred on his home province, KwaZulu-Natal, and have evolved into a general outpouring of anger. Shopping malls have burned, dozens of people killed, and soldiers sent onto the streets. The government has said criminals are taking advantage of anger among Zuma's supporters to steal and cause damage. But the unrest is also fueled by exasperation at difficult living conditions that have worsened during the COVID-19 pandemic. On Tuesday, the United Nations in South Africa warned that the violence will only exacerbate the hardships caused by poverty, unemployment and inequality. Concerns are growing over the impact of the unrest on food and fuel supply. At a gas station in Durban, Joe Dlamini is queuing for petrol.
The people starting fire, the shops, everything, that's why the queue for petrol is like this.
The violence is also hitting the economy. The rand, one of the best performing emerging market currencies during the pandemic, hit a 3-month low on Tuesday and continued to hover there on Wednesday. Local and hard currency bonds have suffered and shares in banks and real estate firms also tanked. On Wednesday, an industry official said South Africa's largest refinery, located in Durban, had been temporarily shut down.
That was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. The war in Ethiopia's northern region of Tigray appears set to intensify as the Prime Minister signaled the end of a government ceasefire, and the neighboring Amhara region says it will go on the offensive against Tigrayan forces. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed abruptly pulled central government troops out of most of Tigray last month, citing a unilateral ceasefire that the Tigray People's Liberation Front allegedly mocked as a joke, designed to justify his forces to retreat. In a statement on Wednesday, Abiy said the ceasefire had failed to deliver. The TPLF, which has recaptured most of its home region in the past 3 weeks after an abrupt reversal in an 8-month war, is vowing to retake Western Tigray, an expansive of fertile territory controlled by Amhara forces who seized it during the conflict. An Amhara regional government spokesperson says the authorities there are rallying their own forces for a counterattack against Tigrayan forces. Nigeria is set to resume its coronavirus vaccinations, having exhausted its supply of doses last week, with shots donated by COVAX and the United States. Neka Chile has the details.
Nigeria expects to receive nearly 8 million doses of coronavirus vaccines, including some donated by the United States, by the end of August, the head of its primary care agency has said, amid fears that the country could be on the verge of a third wave of infections. Faisal Shuaib, head of the National Primary Health Care Development Agency, said Nigeria exhausted its initial supply of nearly 4 million shots last week. He said the aim is to resume vaccinations within weeks when the new doses arrive. The 3.9 million AstraZeneca doses received in March cover just a fraction of its 200 million citizens.
With the detection of the Delta variant,
Shuaib said the detection of a highly contagious Delta variant earlier this month meant Nigerians needed to continue observing public health measures. The United States last month outlined a plan to share 55 million COVID-19 vaccine doses globally via the COVAX sharing scheme. Nigeria expects 3.93 million doses Pfizer-BioNTech or Moderna doses from the US in August, and an additional 3.92 million from COVAX by the end of July or early August.
Neka Chile of Reuters filed that report. Overdose deaths in the United States soared to a record 93,000 last year amid a continued tide of illegal narcotics, many of them smuggled into the country from Central America. VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Bob traveled to the region with the top U.S. Admiral for Latin America, where the drug war is still raging amid many other challenges.
The U.S. war on drugs turned 50 this year, but the body count keeps growing. The CDC just announced a record 93,000 Americans died from overdoses in 2020. Many illegal narcotics are smuggled by cartels based in Latin America. Overseeing U.S. military operations targeting the crime syndicates there is Admiral Craig Fowler, the head of U.S. Southern Command. He sat down exclusively with VOA during a recent trip to Panama.
It's about sustained pressure on these organizations, and we are making a difference, but clearly, when you look at the tens of thousands that are dead in the U.S. and the impact here in partner nations, and the impact that has on driving irregular migration, more needs to be done.
The U.S. and its allies stopped more drugs from entering the U.S. in 2020 than the year before. But the hundreds of metric tons of cocaine captured in drug bust are just a fraction of what's coming to the United States. And narcotics aren't the only way these cartels wreak havoc.
It's human smuggling, it's illegal mining, it's money laundering, it's any illicit business that gives them power, and in many cases they control territory. And they're murderers, heinous. And this is the most violent region in the world, and we have to play a role working together.
The latest overdose data comes as more than 1 million Latin Americans have died from COVID-19. Latin America and the Caribbean account for less than 10% of the world's population, but have seen about 30% of the globe's recorded COVID-19 deaths.
They are having even a more difficult time responding to some of the challenges now than may have been true a year ago.
In his first interview since becoming Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Western Hemisphere, Daniel Erickson told VOA the U.S. has sent about 20 million vaccine doses to the region, with more on the way. As the pandemic grows, poverty and insecurity drive record numbers of migrants to the U.S.-Mexico border, especially Central Americans from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, the Northern Triangle. Border apprehensions are at a 2-decade high, on pace to reach nearly 2 million this year.
It's difficult for some folks in the region to see a future in their countries, and so they're taking the opportunity to come to the United States now, and human smugglers are also taking advantage of this opportunity, this new posture and new set of rhetoric coming from a new administration.
Is the administration starting to rethink its policies?
Sure, I wouldn't say we're rethinking the policies. It's more about rebuilding the policies. And what the administration is working on now with respect to fostering development in the Northern Triangle is really seen as the first step in what it will be a longer-term process, but also one that can help address this migration situation so it doesn't emerge in the same way again.
The Biden administration recently announced a $4 billion aid plan to Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. But experts say past U.S. efforts have failed to reach those who need it most because of corruption and violence in the region. Carla Babb, VOA News.
As protests continue in Cuba, hundreds of people in Miami's Little Havana neighborhood have taken to the streets in support of the demonstrations in the Caribbean nation. Lilia Anisimova has the story, narrated by Anna Rice.
The protests in Cuba are the largest in decades. Cubans in Havana and elsewhere in the communist nation are protesting the lack of food and medicine and the overall economic crisis caused by the coronavirus pandemic. To express their solidarity, Cuban Americans in Florida have also taken to the streets. The so-called Little Havana area in Miami has seen hundreds of people demonstrating in support of the protesters in Cuba. Many gathered at the Versailles restaurant, where Cuban exiles once met to plot against Fidel Castro.
I'm from Cuba. I was born in Cuba, and all my family from Cuba. I have family there. They say there's a lot of violence, like the police keeps hitting people, and that's really bad, because they don't have nothing to fight back. It's bad because they don't have any medicine, they don't have the vaccine, they don't have anything.
I thought I would never see this, that the Cuban people uprising and fighting for their rights. This is not because of COVID. COVID was just, they say, the accelerator or the catalyst, but this has been because of 60 years of struggling, the Cuban people, repression. You cannot say what you think, you cannot do what you think, and you're told everything, how to do, what to do.
The people in Cuba, they're in the streets marching for medicine, marching for food. The government has failed them for many years, and they're getting tired. And there is no support there. They don't know that we're out here supporting them.
Local authorities in Miami have joined the demonstrations. Miami Mayor Francis Suarez was born and raised in South Florida, but his father, Xavier, was the first Cuban-born mayor of Miami when he was first elected in 1985.
The United States and the international community must do something now. They need to come together, similarly to how they came together to condemn the acts in Venezuela. The government of Cuba is an illegitimate government, is not a democratic government, and the people of Cuba are starving. They're in need of medicine. They're in need of international help.
The Biden administration has also expressed its support for the Cuban demonstrators, underscoring their right to peacefully protest. For Lilia Anisimova in Miami, Florida, Anna Rice, VOA News.
We would like to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, a treasure trove of musical memorabilia goes up for sale in New York. Stay with us.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Mudu, in Washington every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Welcome back to Africa 54. As the COVID-19 Delta variant spreads in record numbers in Indonesia, hospitals are overwhelmed. The situation is forcing many residents to care for sick families themselves. VOA's Ahadian Utama reports.
This Jakarta resident spent hours in line in front of this refilling station before he finally got oxygen. It is so tough now. I have looked in many places. I have been here since this morning. They're only filling my tank now. Hundreds of people like David flock to this station as hospitals are bursting with more patients than they can handle. Many choose to self-isolate at home in the care of their family. These patients rely heavily on oxygen supplies. In Indonesia, oxygen tanks vary in sizes, from a portable half-liter to 6,000-liter tanks. Prices have gone up sixfold since the new coronavirus wave started here. But this station owner isn't raising his prices. But with demand more than double, he has put limit on how many tanks each customer can fill up. We used to cater to 40 to 60 people a day. Now it's 100 to 150 people. To refill, it's $1.25 per cubic meter, and we limit 5 tanks per customer. Many groups started helping with the shortage. One group of volunteers started Oxygen for People, a program to lend oxygen tanks to residents in dire need in Jakarta and the surrounding city for free. Within days, more than 1,500 people reached out to this group. We started this movement to respond to the situation in the last 2 weeks with the oxygen shortage. Those who need oxygen tanks just need to sign up on Google Form. We have an assessment team who will respond with necessary information and whether we can lend them a tank. Those who get it will have to agree they can only keep it for 7 days. Everything is for free. One resident who came to this location in East Jakarta is very grateful for this program. Frankie recently lost his father to COVID and is trying to save another family member at home. I don't want to lose anyone else, so I will do my best. What's difficult is all refill stations are closed. This is so tough. Lives are lost because there's no oxygen. Now I have it, and I hope to give this miracle for my family. The Indonesian government has promised to step up the country's production and distributions of oxygen, as well as arrange for imports of oxygen tanks. For Indra Yoga, Ahadian Utama, VOA News.
U.S. President Joe Biden was in Philadelphia Tuesday to urge the passing of voting rights legislation that has stalled in Congress, but he did not outline a path to overcome Republican opposition. The president's speech came as Republicans in state legislatures sought to pass measures restricting access to voting. VOA White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara reports.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is the birthplace of American democracy, with landmarks such as the Liberty Bell, which celebrates the Declaration of Independence. On Tuesday, the city became a backdrop for President Joe Biden as he revived his push to secure voting rights.
We'll be asking my Republican friends in Congress and states and cities and counties to stand up for God's sake and help prevent this concerted effort to undermine our election and the sacred right to vote. Have you no shame?
Biden called on Democrats to unite and fight, but did not outline a new strategy to advance a federal bill that would expand access to voting nationwide. The bill was blocked by Republicans in June.
The motion is not agreed to.
States, not the federal government, determine how Americans can vote and how votes are counted. This year, at least 17 states with Republican majority legislators have passed laws that Democrats say will make it harder for people, particularly minorities, to participate in elections. On Monday, Democratic lawmakers walked out of the Texas legislative session during discussion of a voting restrictions bill.
The nationwide Republican vote suppression efforts, anti-voter efforts, is coming to a crisis point in the state of Texas right now.
Republicans say the laws are designed to eliminate voter fraud.
It's disingenuous and downright false to claim that any effort to prevent fraud is a veiled attempt at voter suppression.
Voting rights have become a source of intense partisan divide. A recent Monmouth University poll showed 32% of respondents believe Biden won only due to voter fraud, despite no evidence.
What's really driving it especially is what? Donald Trump. Donald Trump's claim, going back to even 2016, when he said if he didn't win the election, it would be because of voter fraud. He made the same arguments before 2020 election, after. So a lot of it is being driven by Donald Trump, but his base, and the Republican base at this point, likes this argument.
An argument that Biden called out.
The big lie is just that, a big lie.
Claims by former President Donald Trump.
We will stop the steal.
And Trump supporters that Biden stole the 2020 election led to the siege on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
In the future, keyboards and remote controls may be replaced with a more direct way for humans to interact with machines, hand gestures. VOA's Elizabeth Lee has more.
Typing, swiping, and even clicking may soon be obsolete. They are already being replaced by voice-activated commands.
Call Mama Work.
Calling Mama Work. Mobile.
And then I can select a field.
Next up, wearing a wristband that allows you to interact with a machine with just a flick of a finger.
When I press my fingers together, I'm drawing a line, and the amount of pressure is actually translated into the width of the line.
The Israeli company Wearable Devices developed this mudra band that senses electrical signals generated by the body.
They actually tap into your mind. That's sort of like the magic of it.
When the sensors come in contact with the skin, they detect and translate the electrical signals from the nerves in the wrist into hand gestures through deep learning algorithms.
This signal is not coming from the movement, it comes from my brain. So if I move my fingers mechanically with another hand, you can see that there is no change in the signal.
From answering phones when it's inconvenient to touch a screen, to taking selfies and playing games. Wearable Devices is not the only company working on this type of technology. In 2019, the head of Facebook Reality Labs announced acquiring the company Control Labs, which developed a similar wristband for reportedly more than $500 million. The mudra band is being used with some smartwatches. Virtual and augmented reality applications are also likely, but
not every technology is a good fit with the mudra band.
What is certain is that the future of computing will tap into this type of technology to allow users to more directly and quickly interact with computers with just a gesture. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News.
Guernsey's auction house in New York is auctioning off pieces of music history this week. Evgeny Maslov has this story, narrated by Anna Rice.
New York-based auction house Guernsey's calls this event a century of music. On the auction block, guitars owned by music legends like Paul McCartney, Eddie Van Halen, Bo Diddley, and Eric Clapton. even musical instruments played by a politician.
Believe it or not, this saxophone was played by Bill Clinton on the evening he was inaugurated president at the gala presidential ball in Washington, D.C.
Arlan Ettinger, president of the Guernsey's auction house, says he's proud of every single musical gem of this collection.
And speaking of Eddie Van Halen, here is one of his most famous guitars from the 1980s, known as a striper. It was said that Eddie himself did the stripes, put on tape, painted the thing, took the tape off, and there you have the white stripes.
Here is Bill Clinton's saxophone with the autographs of Michael Jackson, Jack Nicholson, and Goldie Hawn. There are also some unique bits of music history. For example, the doors from New York City's famous Chelsea Hotel are being put up for auction. Janis Joplin, Andy Warhol, Bob Dylan, and Jimi Hendrix not only stayed at Chelsea short-term, but at times lived there for extended periods of time. Also for sale are objects from the Woodstock Musical Festival, ranging from road signs to stage covering.
On the grounds of Woodstock was a hand-painted big 4 foot by 8 foot, 1.5 by nearly 3 meter hand-painted directional sign, map, saying, you are here, the stage is there, the outhouses are over there, the pond where you can go swimming is there, and it was very beautifully done. And there was only one of them. We have that. We have sections of the stage of Woodstock, big pieces of the wooden stage. And as I said a moment ago, we have hundreds of the original photographic transparencies, the original photographs and the camera used by the photographer chosen to be on the stage at Woodstock. So pictures of Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jerry Garcia, Crosby, Stills.
Guernsey's auction house specializes in more unusual objects like these. All in all, over 1,000 pieces are being sold in the A Century of Music auction. Tom Crandall, who owns a vintage guitar store, came to take a look.
The banjos caught my attention because I think it's an interesting and very deep collection, right? Also, the parlor guitars are unusual. You just don't see that many of them. A lot of them didn't survive. They're not terribly valuable, but they're still interesting.
Officials say because of the pandemic, the auction will take place online and by phone. For Evgeny Maslov in New York, Anna Rice, VOA News.
That's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, we thank you for watching.